How about now? Yes, I think you should be hearing me now, yeah? Cool. All right, so take a look here. Here are the links for the class today. There's notes and a practice project. I'd like you to download the practice project and start working there. Also, if somebody could occasionally repost that thing, copy it now, and repost it occasionally through the class, that would help me out. Okay, so you should be downloading this Ableton file and getting it open. Um, this project that we're going to work on today is a short section from the project that we're going to look at in depth in our studio class on Saturday. So this was brought to us by my friend Hamilton Berry, an awesome cellist and composer and teacher. This is, well, we'll let him tell you about it. So Hamilton, if you would hop on the chat box and tell us a little context for this project. You there, Hamilton? It's hard to tell. Cool. So this is a project like a lot of projects that are happening now. I just was part of one recently as well, where a friend of mine said, here's a song, here's a recording of us playing it. Everybody else who used to get together and do these singing parties, everybody record on your own layer of you singing the chorus of the song, and we'll put it together and make a piece. So this poses a couple of challenges to mixing and producing music in general, which are that the levels of quality of recording for everybody are going to be really different. Everybody's going to record in their own spaces. Everybody's going to record with whatever devices they have. It is not an ideal scenario. And so, but it's a really common one. And so today, as we go through a step-by-step process of mixing, we'll kind of be looking from that perspective of how can we take something that isn't super professionally recorded and make it sound as good as it can. So yeah, I just want to say thanks so much to Hamilton and Mel for sharing this material with us so that we have something in a kind of a raw state to work from. Cool. So I'm going to work through the notes. This is a mixing class. We've covered what I think of as the core concepts of mixing and the most difficult concepts of mixing in the past weeks. We did a class on clarity, where we just worked with EQ the whole class. We did a class on presence, which is all about compression. And we did a class all about space, where we dove really deep into reverb. But I haven't really given you a sense of what the whole process of mixing looks like. So that's what today is for. We're going to zoom out. We're going to mix this bit of a track, and I'll walk you through each step and talk about my thought process as we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is a common argument between engineers, which is, do you mix as you go or mix at the end? It's not really an argument, it's just like two philosophies of working. Mix as you go means like, yes, you sit there, you record your guitar part, then do you immediately sit down and EQ it and compress it and put effects on it and try to make it right? Or do you record all of your rough stuff and then do all the mixing at the end? I wrote a short essay about this in the notes that you can read, but I'm going to give you the TLDR right now, which is I recommend that you mix as you go and mix at the end. But you do them with different attitudes. So as you're working, you're going to want to be playing with effects, shaping sound. Sound design is such an important part of the compositional process, not just the like polishing off of a mix process. So you're definitely going to be thinking about sound all the time. If something sounds wrong, fix it. If you can anticipate a problem, like two instruments competing for the same frequency range, get ahead of it. And if you have an idea, you should try it. But as you're writing, don't get hung up on perfecting your sounds. It can totally kill your creative flow if every time you put a kick drum down, you decide to go try to EQ that kick drum. It slows you down because you can really tweak and get lost down that rabbit hole forever as long as you have the stamina for it. It can also kill your flow because certain of us are more anxious about the creative work and are more comforted by the tweaking of effects. And so it can become a way of procrastinating. And last, you can't really mix something perfectly until you know what context it's in. So it doesn't really make sense to try to get a perfect sound on any of your layers as they're coming one at a time, because you're going to have to change it all again once you realize what kind of context they're in and how they need to fit together. So, when I work, I do a little bit of mixing right away. I do some EQ, I do some compression. I want to be working with sounds that sound good because it's just not very much fun to work with, spend a lot of time hearing something that doesn't sound good. But when I catch myself falling down the rabbit hole, I pull myself out and say, keep writing, you can make it perfect later. So, with the caveat that in real life, as you're doing some mixing as you write and some mixing at the end, of course, the process is going to be different every time. It's not going to be a formulaic step-by-step process exactly in practice. I'm still going to give you a step-by-step process now. This is kind of like abstracted, idealized mixing. So here we go. Mixing step by step. So here's the big picture. We are going to work on small things first and then build up to bigger and bigger things. So we're going to start just making our tracks sound good, and then we're going to make our groups of tracks and make the groups sound good, and then all of our groups together are going to mix together into our master track, and then we work on the mastering layer. So big picture, that's what we're doing. Small stuff first, bubble up into larger and larger structures. Cool. One note. If you use volume automation as you write and you are taking this thing and drawing shapes in it as you go, I recommend getting rid of all of that before you mix. This makes the volume levels of each track like a moving target, and it can be really hard. You can mix it and get it just right over here and then forget about your automation, and all the levels are different of all your tracks later. I recommend not using any volume automation at all, and I'll show you a better way to do things later on. So yeah, first step, get rid of all your volume automation. And the next step is to get organized. So organization includes things like naming your tracks clearly and consistently, sorting your tracks in a consistent way, I recommend doing high sounds on top and low sounds in the middle and then drums at the bottom. So it's like drums and then low to high. It also makes sense to put your lead part on top, like vocals, and then maybe do all of your other layers low to high, and then your drums. Other things that you can do to clean up include, like, if your thing has lots of edits in it, you can smooth out visually what you're doing by committing to those edits and selecting a chunk of time and saying consolidate. And this will print a new audio file that includes all of your edits. You also may have some times where an instrument plays for a while and then doesn't play for a long time and then comes back. So in that gap, there may be room tone, mouth noises, clicks and pops, whatever from the microphone recording. Get rid of those. So trim out silences, maybe do some fades to clean up the edges, but you just want to do a general tidy up. You can use markers, locators to name different parts of your piece, like Command R to rename chorus. And as you work on more and more projects, you'll probably appreciate having a common color coding standard. I'm not really very good at this because I'm not the most organized person in the world, but if I were better organized, I would always make my drums one color and always make my basses the other color. It'll just take extra brain cycles out of the equation every time you are thinking about things and looking for things. Okay, so now is a chance for you to practice. I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock. By the way, today we're going to practice lots of these things, but you're not going to have enough time to finish them. That's okay. Don't get stressed out by my clock. We'll just get started on each of these processes. Then you can work on your own and finish it and try to get it sounding as good as you can, and then come back Saturday at the same time where the whole class, I'll go through that process myself and talk through my whole thought process. So I think you'll get the most out of that class if you do this as homework and try it out yourself. Okay, so I'll put 3 minutes on the clock. Go ahead and look at this project. If you're just showing up, the project link is now posted again. Hamilton, just so you know, I took off all of your mixing. You did good work already, but I want to start from scratch here. Okay, so I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock. Do some of this organizational stuff. Naming tracks consistently, sorting them low to high, doing any cleanup you want to, though I actually already did that for you. Okay, ready, set, go. If you have the missing media files thing, I think that's because I think you should have each of these for sure. And what it's telling you it's missing is the whole song. You can double click the missing media files thing bar at the bottom, the orange bar, and it'll open up here on the right, and then you can click automatic search go. But if you have these 7 things the way that I have it, and you have missing files, don't worry, you're not actually missing anything. Ah, I see. Yes, so these are supposed to refer, my mistake. I should have cleared these out before I gave it to you. That's fine. Missing over here is not a problem. If you have these here, you are fine. Okay, let's hop back. I'll do the same. So vocals, rhythm and lead, bass, drums, cello, piano. So I'm going to put drums at the bottom, cello below the piano, bass below the piano. This kind of makes sense to me. Maybe bass here. This reflects what I hear. Vocals on top, and then we've got higher things, lower things, and the drums. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is organize our signal flow. And you do this really easily in Ableton with groups. In other DAWs, this is called buses, but in Ableton, this is groups. So basically, we want to group like things. So these are both guitars, so maybe we make a guitar group. I'm going to select both of these tracks, Control-click, and group tracks. And then I'll name this Command-R, guitars. And then in Live 10, I'm very excited that they have finally given us groups of groups. So here's how I would group this. You want to basically end up with a supergroups, just a very few number of supergroups. And for me, the way this makes sense to break down is that there's the vocals on top, and then there's the drums, and then there's everything else. So this is like group of the band. Maybe you want to group cello and bass. I'm not sure. They're pretty different sounds, even though they fill a similar function. Okay, so go take 1 minute and do this grouping. Okay, come on back. So the next thing I suggest that you do is go find a reference track or two. We're going to skip this now, but the usefulness of a reference track cannot be overstated. Um, a reference track is just some other piece of music, some professionally released something that sounds really, really good, that you would like your track to sound like. You can grab, yeah, not coffee. It's my soup lunch. So yeah, a reference track is something that sounds as good as you want yours to sound. That's in a similar style. So as you mix, you'll have tons and tons of questions like how wide should I pan my instruments? How much louder should I put the foreground than the background? How much reverb should I use on the the foreground vocal or whatever? And the answer to all of these questions is check your reference to get a good idea of how to answer that question. So we'll skip that now, but yeah, we'll skip that now, but you should always do that. It's especially useful in the mastering stage. Okay. So, working through tracks one by one is the next stage. So again, we're starting with small units and we're making bigger and bigger units and working on them in turn. So I'm going to take one of these tracks and think through each of the categories of sound that I want to consider. And then I'm going to give you a bunch of time to pick a track and maybe a couple of tracks and do the similar thing. So those categories of thought are color, clarity, presence, space, and headroom or gain staging. So I will look at, let's take a look at the second guitar part, this lead guitar part. I think it's on top in how you hear it, and so I'm going to put it on top in the group here. So I'm going to solo this track and talk about each of these things. Let me know about relative volume of the track to my voice. Okay, so I put color down first, but I actually want to think about clarity first here. So, because I'm hearing it as pretty muted, it's not really going to speak through. It's a pretty dark sound. So, my first thought is to grab an EQ. And just make it brighter. So, I can be a little more disciplined here. By doing our EQ techniques in order. So back to the EQ class, we talked about 4 different EQ techniques. The first one is bracketing, where you cut out parts of the sound that you don't need. So basically everything below here, I don't hear any change when I do this, and so that's useless sound. The guitar itself is bottoming out around here. We could bracket the top end too, but we've got such little high end that I'm not worried about keeping it around. In fact, I want more. So the next EQ technique is tone shaping. So we do more gentle curves instead of cuts, just to get a more attractive sound. I'm gonna do a sweep real fast to listen to this guitar, because right now there's a kind of boxiness to it, like I feel like it's stuck in a box. And so I'm gonna turn on the audition. I'm gonna make a narrow-ish bell curve. And I'm gonna sweep until I hear that really kind of boxy sound. Okay, so down here is just the attack of the notes. I just hear the thump of fingers on strings. Want a little wider area here. So that's kind of muddy and sounds like it's in a box. So that's like 200 hertz. I'll remember that. Here's where the real clarity of the sound comes. From like here to here is where I hear the notes most clearly. So I'm going to do a big bell curve in that range. And then I'm going to do another one to cut around 200. Just a little bit. I also hear, okay, so this is a lot more clear to me. What do you think? Okay, so that's a more clear sound. I'm getting a couple of questions that I'm going to hit right now. How do we send tracks to be considered for Saturday's studio class? Just send me an email, send me the project, and if I'll pick a Saturday where I think it would be useful to do it on. And then how good is EQ8 compared to FabFilter Pro Q? So, I don't know. I'm not someone who cares too much about fancy EQs. So there are some EQs that like emulate analog gear that don't just shape the sound, but actually give it kind of some sort of classic color and vibe. That's one thing. But just a general EQ like this or FabFilter or something, they all do pretty much the same thing. They just... so use the one that you know how to use the best and you like the interface for. That said, the FabFilter is really awesome because you can set thresholds on these things. So it only engages the EQ if the volume goes over a certain level. So that's actually one that has cool extra features. But you're fine with the basic EQ8. It's a lot more about knowing how to use it. Justin Hendricks, my email, why don't you can sign up on my website. There's a link down below and you'll get emails from me about the classes and you can reply there. But it's elliottccole@gmail.com also. Okay, so back to this. We've got a more clear sound now. The next thing to think about is compression, its presence. So how do you know if a track needs to be compressed? A track should be compressed if there's a lot of variation between the peaks and the valleys. What we want to do is make the valleys fatter and the peaks smaller. And you can get a long, thorough explanation of how the compressor works in the compression class, but for now, I'll just do it quickly. You should be in this mode is the most helpful. Click on this third one. And then turn down the threshold, so you chop off some tops, turn up the ratio to like 2, 3, or 4 for natural sounds. And then turn up output so that the peaks of the dark gray, of the bright gray, kind of make up for the peaks of the dark gray. I'm gonna take a loud part here and loop it. So I want my... Yeah. So I'm trying to take this peak and turn up my output to make up basically for the amount of gain that I lost with the compressor. Cool. Perceptions. For more information, I go in tons of depth in the compressor class, but for the sake of time today, I'll just say that a shorter attack is going to make sounds less punchy, and a longer attack is going to let more of the punchy initial spike through. So on this, I actually do want to tame those things. It doesn't really need to be punchy. I want more tone and body. Cool, and this sounds just a little artificial to me. I think I'm going to take the threshold up a little bit and then turn down dry wet a little bit just so I mix in some of the natural sound with the compressed sound. Okay, so we've thought about clarity and presence. Now we're going to think about color. So this is really, any effects are fair game here for thinking about how we want to color the sound. I'd like more high frequencies in this thing, so that it speaks better and cuts through the mix more. It's just to make up for some of the darkness of the sound. And so I'm going to do Saturator. So Saturator is like some mild distortion, and distortion adds some soft, high frequency sparkle to sounds. So a question about makeup gain. So actually turning up the out is makeup gain. That's the manual way to do makeup. There's also an automatic one that you can also use. It always does too much for me. I never want as much as it decides to do. So I do it myself visually, trying to match the after spikes with the before spikes. Cool, so Saturator, let's just... This is a lot, way too much, but a little bit is nice, but then we want to go backwards and take off some of the gain that we add. So we're adding some distortion. But we want to not add volume. We want to keep things controlled. So I'm actually going to boost more of the highs here now. Cool, and the last thing you might do on a guitar is put it through a guitar amp. I rarely use these things, so I'm not quite sure a good starting place, but that adds some saturation in a kind of an amplifier style. I like that. Okay, cool. So let's see. I'm going to just keep working through this list, and then I'll hit your questions while you work on a track of your own. So we've done clarity, EQ, presence, compression, color with some saturation, amp modeling. Next is space. So where do we want this? It's kind of a contextual question because we want to place it in the context of the whole mix. But I think, so let's pause on panning. The next question is depth. Do we want it in the foreground or the background? I think we want it in the foreground because it's like a lead part that we want to hear clearly. So I'm not going to put reverb on it yet. But actually I'm going to put a little reverb because I'm going to put a little reverb on everything. So I'm going to solo the reverb track too. Just get a little reverb in. Cool. So that's a good approximation of space. We want it in the foreground, and we'll figure out panning later. And then the last thing to think about is headroom or gain staging. Here's the basic idea. The maximum volume, the top of this meter, where it goes from green to red, is 0. It's the same on the master track. The top volume that you get before it goes into the red and you start getting distortion is 0. And the way sounds work is when they get mixed together, they get summed. These are actually numbers. This is a number between 0 and 1 for this dot on the curve. And if any other waveforms that are happening right then, they're all going to get added together. And if those numbers go over 1, then your cup runneth over. You get distortion in the master track. So we want all of our tracks to have plenty of headroom, meaning space between the top of their volume level and 0. All that space is space that it needs to share with other tracks. So I take everything down to -6. I use that as my baseline volume level instead of 0 for all of my tracks. And that's why I set it up this way. But basically you want to look at the volume level of the track and pull it down so that it's not at the top, and instead leave some space to be able to mix well with other tracks. Okay, so those are the steps. You can, I'll put them up on the screen as you work through a track or two of your own. I'm going to put 10 minutes on the timer. Oh no, looking at the clock. I'll put 5 minutes on the timer for this, and you can get started. So, and I'll answer questions at the same time. Okay, ready, set, go. Okay, my clocks on the screen are not working right today, so I'll figure that out later. But we'll come back at 1:44. Okay, one more minute. Okay, come on back. So, say you've put an hour or two into this, and each of these tracks has gotten some love. And you've optimized the sound, you've made it clear, you've balanced out the peaks, you've tamed the peaks with compression, and gotten a good color and vibe for each of these sounds, and left plenty of headroom so they all mix together, and you've started placing them in space in a thoughtful way. Now we want to bubble up to the next level and not work on individual tracks anymore, but work on whole groups. So sometimes there are effects that make more sense to go on the group rather than on the individual track. Like if you have lots of different layers of the same guitar that you want to have the same sound, don't put the amp on every single one of those. Put the amp on the final group. Any effects that you find yourself placing again and again and again exactly the same way on a bunch of tracks, consider moving them to a group to simplify. The way signal flow works is that every one of the tracks inside a group flows out to the group bus. The group bus has its own effects chain. So you can put any effects here that you want to apply to everything inside of the group. So we can see here, this box is the output. So on vocals, it's going straight to the master track. But inside this group, these two guys are going to guitars here. And then from guitars, it goes out to band. And then from band, it goes to master. So that's how signal flow works. So we want to get inside of each of our groups a good balance of the sounds. So I've got these two guitar layers. I haven't really gotten the right sound for the guitar here yet. So, but let's just pretend that I did, and I pick a volume level between the two of them where I can hear them both, and maybe a panning relationship. So I'm going to put maybe my lead over here, my rhythm guitar here. That's nice, I get some separation, I can hear them both a lot more clearly. And set general volume levels to match the two. So you would do that in each of your group. Get all of your tracks relative to each other within the group, balanced well. Then you could go to your supergroups and do the same thing. Try to balance the groups, group by group. Get the piano, the cello, and the bass relative to the guitars group going on. Other things you might want to do on the group include a little more compression, which can help glue the layers of the group together. But remember, you don't have to compress very much because you've already compressed each individual part. What you're doing now is just taming any peaks that might happen from the individual layers coming together at the same time. So that could create some new peaks that you want to tame, but I think you want to do it really gently with a compressor. You probably also want to do another EQ pass and just make some slight adjustments to the sound to bring out the whole group as a whole. So once you've balanced the relative volume of the tracks within each group and gotten the group sounding good, then the next thing you do is balance the groups against the other groups. And so say that I've balanced everything already within the band group. Now I just have 3 groups left. I have band, drums, and vocals. And so now I can set the relative volumes of these 3 groups, and it's a lot simpler to, problem to solve, how to fit these things together if you're not adjusting every little thing separately. We already know the band is right, and so we're just setting the band against the vocals and finding balance, and then finding balance against the drums. So this is really why it's smart to do this kind of grouping small to large process. If you try to mix and you have 30 tracks and you're controlling each of them independently, then you change one, and then you think, okay, now I need to change the drums relative to that, and then I need to change something else relative to that, but now the drums feel wrong relative to that. It's just too complicated a problem. So use groups. And this is also when you want to think about the last EQ technique that we talked about, which is EQ mirroring, mirror EQ, which is also called sometimes EQ slotting or EQ, slotting. And this is the idea that we want to make things fit together in the whole frequency spectrum. I'll give you a very quick example of that right here. Let's just take a look at these vocals. We'll cut the noise at the bottom. And then I'm going to look for the place where they're the most clear and attractive. So this sounds kind of boxy and roomy down here. That sounds really nice. So I want to boost the part that's really nice. And cut exactly the mirror image of this in the things that it's competing with. So if I've got my band here, let's just take a look here. This is the EQ on the voice. It's kind of like, mids and highs. On the band, mids and highs, there's a lot going on, so they're going to compete for space. So I take that same boost that I gave the voice. I just copied this effect from here onto the group. So this is the boost that the voice got. I want to cut that by a similar amount to leave space for the voice. So you should think about this with every pair of instruments that is going to conflict. The most common one that is going to create conflicts in almost everything that you make is between the kick drum and the bass. And so what you should think about with kick drum and the bass is which of them should be higher. You've got really 2 bass ranges. Let's take a look at this bass here. So on a bass, below 100, I'm going to do audition so we only hear the frequencies under the bell. Under 100, you get really low subtone, but it doesn't really have any color. And as you go up, the higher frequencies are actually where the character of the instrument are. It's punchy here, and then we've got interesting string sound, and this is what's going to make it audible, on your laptop speakers or whatever that don't have good bass. So you don't want to cut the high end on a bass. That's where its character is. So you should decide, am I more interested in the tone, the subtone of the bass, or the punch of the bass, more like up here? And then you want to make the opposite determination for your kick. If you're boosting the subtone of the kick, you want to get that out of the way a little bit on the bass and focus on boosting the bass in the higher range. And vice versa. If you want your kick to be more punchy, boost it on the higher side, cut it on the lower side, and slot the bass into that lower side of it. So yeah, there's more explanation about that in the EQ class. I call it EQ mirroring, also called EQ slotting. So you've now balanced all the levels in general, and you've thought about your EQ spectrum and given everybody their own bit of the EQ spectrum to shine in and made space for them there. The last thing that you want to do is now think about volume automation. So one example that I dealt with in something that I mixed the other day was that there was a guitar solo. For a long time, well, it was like a dulcimer. The dulcimer was playing accompaniment for most of it, and then took a solo, and then went back into the background. And so I wanted to boost the volume level of it in that solo part so that it came out and took center stage. The obvious way to do that would be to automate your volume control here, but I don't want you to do that. I actually think that you should never do automation on your volume track. Here is a better way. Take your gain knob. So you have a utility plugin that just has a really simple volume knob on it. Automate this instead. If I want to boost in this section, let's see, do it on the utility gain. You can think about this as changing the volume relative to whatever you set here. So if I have this boost here, sorry, I'm gonna get rid of all this. Okay, going from 0 and boosting this section. That's going to boost it relative to whatever I set here. So the problem with automating the volume control is that then you get to a point where big picture, you say, I just want all of my guitars to be a little bit louder in the mix. And then you reach for the volume slider and you turn it up, but you can't because there's actually tons of automation drawn in, and you have to go in and move all of your automation, and it's just error prone and time consuming and fussy to have to be changing automation every time you want to change the volume. Way better just to change it once here a little bit. So then this change on the utility gain knob is going to be, as I said, relative to whatever you set here, and then you're free to change this later. Okay, so that's the volume automation pass. And then you've balanced all your groups, you've bubbled up to the biggest layer, which is the master track. And we're about out of time, and that's good. It was crazy for me to think that I could talk about mixing and mastering all in one class. I've given you some pointers for doing your own mastering in the text document. Mastering is probably the last thing that you should do until you're a professional master. Like, nobody masters their own stuff when they're in a professional context. They always send it to a professional master, and you can get yours mastered for a couple $100. It's always worth getting done by a pro, but if you want to just be making your demos sound as good as possible, learning some mastering ideas is useful, and I've put a couple of those in, as well as a link to tutorial and some example racks that you can use there in the text document. Okay. So sorry to rush us through here at the end. Thank you so much for coming. I hope that this was useful. I will definitely stick around and answer questions. Can go into any of these things again. If you want to work on things, if you want to work on this for a bit and then come back for questions, I'll stick around for like half an hour. And yeah, thanks for coming. Saturday, we're going to actually mix this track and you can see what I've done. So do some homework. Try your hand at it, mix it the best you can, and then come in and watch. And I think you'll get a lot out of this on Saturday. Hit the heart button on top if you're new and you haven't followed the channel. I do this on a pay what you want basis. So if you found this useful, I would really appreciate it if you sent me a couple of bucks. There's a PayPal link down below. And next, oh yeah, I'll send everybody an email. If you're not on the email list, sign up. I send extra stuff out there and notifications about the class schedule. I'm really excited about, oh, one more thing. I would love for you to check out something and do me a little favor. I would love to hear what you think about the first tutorial video that I have ever made. I really didn't think I wanted to be making like slick YouTube tutorials because I would rather sit and be in a class kind of setting than sit behind it video editing all day. But I had an idea and wanted to make this for you, and I actually had a ball doing it. So I would love if you checked out that YouTube video now. It's going to be the basis of our class on Monday. So if you're interested in what I'm doing here, this is like a trick, but then a whole compositional process with some notes on it. I'll lead you through that process on Monday, and we'll make a track basically the same way that you see me make a track here. And yeah, I'd love your feedback and views. So thank you. Tuesday. If I said Monday, next class is not Monday, it is Tuesday. If you showed up late and you missed the links, they are here. There's some written notes and a project to work on. Oh, I'm glad you saw the video, Justin. I made it, I put it on Reddit, and immediately people are like, yeah, I've known that a long time. Actually, there's this better way to do it. But I still think it's useful. If you haven't seen this trick before, I think it can change a lot about how you write and how fun it is to write in Ableton. Yeah, so Gabrielle is asking, what about the volume of the clips? Do you try to adjust them to all roughly the same before you start mixing? Should they have a specific amount of headroom? They should be, yeah, so let's just take a step back. I kind of glossed over this. Our big picture process of bubbling up from small layers, small units to bigger and bigger units, it starts earlier than the track. The smallest unit is actually the region. And if you end up with regions that are all different volume levels, it's going to be a heck of a thing to mix. You don't want a compressor trying to smooth this out. You're going to have to make it work way too hard to balance all this stuff, and it's not going to sound right. So on the region level, before you even get to the track level, you want to get the volume levels of each of these regions roughly where they should be. They don't have to all be the same because they may have different functions in the song. Maybe it's quiet at the beginning and then comes in loud again at the end. That's all fine. But you want to get them close to where you want them as early as you can with the gain slider here. As for a specific amount of headroom, like the edges of this thing are maximum. They're 0. So if it's going above, you're going too far. If it's small, then you may have, well, signal to noise issues don't really come into play in a digital situation, but you want a healthy volume level. Healthy is just kind of like middle. Not too small, not too big. Cool. More questions. Bad Assassin, what is your opinion on mastering plugins like Ozone? I'm not a professional mastering person, so take 10, 100 grains of salt with this. Um, I'm a composer who wants to make the music that I make by myself at home sound as good as possible. So I think I'm more in your shoes than in an expert's shoes on this. Um, and from where I'm standing, Ozone is great. You can get Ozone Elements. Um, it's on sale, I think, right now. You can get it for $50 or something. And it's a pretty awesome, like, one button, make your music sound better thing that has a kind of machine learning thing where it will listen to the track and suggest an EQ for the whole track and suggest the compressor and the maximizer. The compressor and the exciter, which are the things that make your track sound bigger and louder. And so it suggests settings that I'm still getting to know how much I trust it, but I'm quite happy with pretty much everything I put it on, and I've been putting it on pretty much everything. Cool. Justin Hendricks. Oh, about my video, it made him want to push or some sort of interface to interface with the folded notes instead of drawing them in. Well, the push already does this. The push lets you filter by scale, so that's one reason that the push is fun to play with. Watch Squash. Are my Saturday studio classes focused on a certain genre, or do you give feedback on any kind of music? Yeah, so I'll look at anything. Usually, I think looking at one thing in a class per Saturday is really all that we can do and go in a lot of depth on. I could also imagine a Saturday class where we do, we look at three things and just kind of do feedback rather than like watching me work on something. That's an interesting format idea. If you're interested in something like that, we could definitely do it. But yeah, if you want to be the presenter for a studio class, you can send me an email, and I guess whether I choose it and when I put it for is a mix of pedagogical and I won't spend time looking at a thing that I don't know how to make better. The whole point of this is for me to kind of walk you through some stages of making something better. So if it's already perfect, I may not pick it, and if it's a kind of music that I just don't understand at all, I may not pick it. But honestly, I actually really like not understanding music, and I think that yeah. Anyway, yeah, just send it to me, and if I think it'll be useful for the class to see, I'll put it on the calendar. Maddie Few, I'm glad you like the style of the tutorial. I made one first where I like talk, and it took 20 minutes to explain the whole thing, and it was really boring. And then I thought, no talking. How can I do it with no talking? Cool. Any other questions? Cool. Well, I am going to stick around for a little bit if people do have questions, but maybe I'll do some work on my own while that's happening. So I'm going to pick up a track I started working on after class last time, but didn't get very far. Justin, do I deal with more real recorded instruments or VSTs more? Um, I'd say it's a mix. I mean, my background is more acoustic music, notes on paper, kind of composing is my training, and most of my professional life has been, writing notes for pianos and violins and guitars and stuff. So lots of past recording projects have been more like that, but I've also always made weird electronic music and noise music, even as a teenager, with Fruity Loops and a